Hey everyone, I'm Scott. Welcome to another free HEB Cooking Connection virtual cooking class. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight. I obviously am Scott. With me as always, my co-host and moderator, we have Chef Charlotte.
Hey there.
Chef Charlotte. Thanks for being here. Last few classes, if you have been with us, the last two classes of our 2021 cooking class series have been more geared toward the dietitian and dietetic, kind of like new year, new you. Some great things, some great information. I love the fact that we had our dietitians on there, a lot of great information. If you want to go back and look at some of the old episodes that we've done through the holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and even the ones we've done just a couple weeks ago, you can go to our YouTube channel, heb.com/YouTube, and you can look up those videos, and you can literally watch along again and again and again and again while you look at those videos over and over again. They're all available, and I want to say that what kind of blows my mind is this. The cooking classes you watch on our YouTube channel, these are absolutely live. There is no cut, there is no editing. When they get done, they literally slap a finish and an ending on it, and then they kind of clean up some of the audio. That's it. This goes live. All your questions are still in the videos. When you go, I can rewatch them. Really cool. So I learned that. So there is no cutting. This is straight top to bottom. We're going to do this live. This is how we're going to do it. So tonight is all about our kind of ultimate steakhouse class. So we're taking a slight turn away from the more the healthy. Now I am going to give you some other ways to make this a little lighter.
Balance.
If you're still on that kick. Balance, yes.
The balance.
Thank you. There's a balance. So ultimate steakhouse class. So on the menu tonight, I'm going to show you something really, really cool. I'm excited to show you mirepoix salt. So what is that? I'll explain it to you. First of all, mirepoix is a French word. I think it was, like most great French culinary terms, it comes from somebody's name a long time ago that they were like, this is the Duke or Duchess of yada, 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 mirepoix. And that's what this guy was. If you look up, you can Google that, anthropology, food anthropology, is a lot of fun facts about where terms came from. So mirepoix is basically a mixture of carrot, celery, and onion. Now, Charlotte and I were talking earlier, there's a lot of different kind of, like, it is usually a base to most things. Like it's a starter to soup, stock, sauces, braised meats. I mean, it can be used on pretty much anything. But you also have in different, Latin America, there's the sofrito. There's also the Cajun Trinity, which has bell pepper instead of carrot. There's different ones. If you wanted to do that, instead of the recipe I'm going to show you, the way I'm going to show you, just classic mirepoix, really simple, you could take your ingredients for sofrito in the same way I'm going to show you, and you could make a sofrito salt. You can also add lemon zest to salt. I love doing flavored salts because in the dish we're going to do, which we'll get to in a second, it adds a lot of flavor. And I can use this salt pretty much throughout the entire class on everything because it's amazing. So I'll show you how to do that. Really fun. A tomato and shallot conserva. So this is kind of it's a fun thing to do, is because think about like ultimate steakhouse, a lot of rich foods, a lot of really good, just like concentrated flavors. So this tomato and shallot conserva uses our flavor bombs. I got it right finally. Fresh shallots, a little red pepper flake, some really good Octavio olive oil, and it all gets cooked low and slow. And it just develops this deep, rich flavor, and I'm going to show you that. And it's really, really good, and we like to use it mostly as a sauce for pastas. You can either blend it up and just add it as a sauce for pastas, or you can use it as just add in the tomatoes and shallots and anything, bread, yeah, anything. It's a great oil. I know when we make a conserva here at our facility, we do it in our test kitchens, we'll use it for everything. So it'll become, like you said, bread spread. We'll use it to marinate chicken in. It can be used as a multitude of things, which we'll get to, but I'll show you that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a mac and mornay. So classic steakhouse always has to have something. We figured we could do cream spinach, but why do cream spinach? You can do mac and cheese. We're going to show you a classic mornay sauce. So mornay, what is a mornay sauce? You ever heard of mornay? There are 5 mother sauces in the French cooking thing, which I'm going to try and name them all. So here we go.
Like
so we got Espagnole, tomate, we have the velouté, we have the hollandaise, and we have the bechamel. And the bechamel is what the mornay comes from. So it's a derivative sauce, the mornay. So it has a little bit of the Gruyere cheese, typically an egg yolk and some butter. We're just adding it to the bechamel. Bechamel is so simple and easy to do. It was really, really important that we got to do this with you guys tonight because it's a great skill. Once you learn how to make the base of mac and cheese, then you go nuts. Then you can do smoked cheeses and peppers and whatever else you want to, but it's learning the fundamentals we want to put in your toolbox so that you can go back to that and go, that's right, that's how I did this. And then you can start doing dark roux and blonde roux, whatever it is. So we'll go through that. Next we're going to do our the big thing, the big steakhouse is going to be the pan roasted ribeye with the mirepoix salt, which I'll show you. and a little bit of truffle butter. Now, I'm going to use truffle butter in a couple different things. If you're like Charlotte and your truffles aren't your speed, unless they're the white summer Piedmontese truffles, you can just omit this and use butter, and I'll show you where we can kind of sub that in. To get started, so for the, we're going to talk about cast iron a little bit. We're going to cook the steaks in a cast iron pan. Now, I am going to use a grass-fed ribeye steak that we get at H-E-B, which has no hormones, no antibiotics, grass-fed, grass-finished. A lot of great products, obviously, at your local H-E-B meat market. These are one of my favorites. We're going to use this product specifically, the grass-fed. You can use any cut. If you want to use prime, if you want to use Wagyu, if you want to use whatever, fantastic. Our steaks are going to be a little thinner, so the cooking time will be a little bit less. That's the one disclaimer I'll tell you. A lot of steaks you get at H-E-B can be a little bit thicker, a little bit thinner, depending on how you cut them or how you want them cut. You're going to have to add a little extra time depending on how thick your steak is. Just know that when we start. But it's all going to get finished with the truffle butter. It's going to be delicious. I'm going to show you how to do it. And because if you've been really good and you've been on your, you took all the advice from dietitians, and you're kind of going, hey, I want to be on the right start, I want to do this. If you're kind of not doing red meat right now for the month of January, I'm going to show you how to do a cauliflower steak in the exact same way. So if you're like, oh, it's all about red meat, I don't want to be here for this, hey, I'm going to show you how to do the exact same preparation and make a killer cauliflower steak in the exact same way. So we're going to get started with the mirepoix salt. So the mirepoix, we talked about that already. I'm going to grab my mise en place. This is one of the easiest things you'll ever make. I don't know if you can see from the top camera. Is it on? Can you see it on? Is it on? It's on. There we go. Okay, so if you have not taken advantage at your local H-E-B of all the great value-added veg, there's a lot of stuff. I would definitely, because we're doing classes, learn to cut vegetables. Do it all the time so you get better at it, so you get really good with those knife skills. That way you'll have less accidents with your knife when you get better at practicing your knife. But for this is our H-E-B fresh ingredient. It's called savory diced vegetables, and it's 1 3/4 cups of diced carrot, celery, and onion. So our typical mirepoix that I like to use is usually like a 25-25-50. So 50% white onion, 25% celery, 25% carrot. And that's pretty much a basic mirepoix.
It adds up to what?
100%. Yeah, math genius. So when you do that, now if you wanted to, if you're not a fan of carrots or you're allergic to celery or whatever it is, you can always just do anything you want. Like we've talked about the sofrito. This is where you could put in your cilantro, your tomatoes, all that stuff, and just kind of lay it over the top. So this is how this is going to work. This is easy. 1 cup of kosher salt. Now, one disclaimer for the recipe. If you looked at the nutrition statement, which Charlotte does, and I'll let her speak to this, if you looked at the nutrition statement on the pan-seared ribeye steak with the mirepoix salt and the truffle butter, and you were like, wow, it has 13,000 grams of sodium. Like, just know, that's if you were to dump the entire cup of salt on your steak, which you probably would not, because unless you just really like salt, but even then, I would say you're probably going to not be as balanced in your palate as you may want to be. So I'm going to spread this out. So that's the disclaimer, right? So it's not using everything. We're going to use about a teaspoon to a tablespoon max, depending on how many steaks we have. This is opened up, and all you're going to do is you just want to put the mirepoix, or these savory vegetables, right over the top of the salt. Reason being, salt, I think we talk about this a lot, salt is the great extractor. So if we put all these great veggies over there, now these are fresh veggies, but we're going to roast these in the oven. So they are going to become caramelized vegetables, and over the time in the oven with the salt, it's going to create a lot of moisture from the actual vegetables themselves. So that's what we want. And what's going to happen is that all these vegetables are going to start to dry out. All the juice and all that wonderfulness is going to seep into the salt, and the salt's going to pick up all that flavor. So you're going to have this intensely flavored salt. So when we put this mirepoix salt on our steak, it's going to seem like we've done so much more to the steak than we actually did, and all we did was just season it, but we just put a base layer of extra flavor down.
So we're going to get these notes of that, like the sweet
caramelized onion. Yeah,
almost like when you roast
celery.
a prime rib. Okay,
yep,
I'm on board.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is a great salt. So now this, because salt is a great extractor and most moisture, it pulls moisture out of things. The salt is pretty safe from a bacterial standpoint to leave on your counter or to stew, because once it's roasted, once the salt's there, it's just going to leach out all that flavor. And you'll see when I show you the one I did, that the salt it just becomes like a crust, much like if you did salt crusted fish. It just becomes this crust, and you break it up and we'll save it. But that's it. That's the whole thing. It goes in the oven, 400 degrees and I let it go for a while. You're not going to hurt the salt.
We have a great question. So
yes.
After the salt is finished, how
yes.
long can you leave it out on the countertop?
So we do a lot of flavored salts. That's a great question. As long as the salt's not wet and it's fully dried and you've given it some time to do that, and that's why I let it really kind of sit and let it dry enough. This preparation is basically made ahead. I've left it on the counter for a month, 2 weeks, and then when I'm done using it, I just throw it away. So you can use it multiple times. If you want to, you can cover it up. If you're worried about it, you can always refrigerate it. But again, because the salt is just going to leach out all the stuff, there's really not a lot of bacterial that's going to grow on salt for the most part. I'm not saying you can't grow bacteria, but that's the whole reason why we're going to roast it, and then we're going to let it sit on the salt, so it's going to leach out all that flavor onto the salt. So this is what this looks like. So you see it breaks up into pieces? So it kind of like the salt is all the moisture's leached out. You see that I've got these pieces. So how do we get rid of this and just put the salt out? So here's how you do this. You get I wouldn't call this like a fancy sieve. This is like a little, you can get any one of these. This is just a normal mesh sieve. If you want to, you can get a finer mesh, but I would say that you want to go with like a medium mesh, because I like a little bit. I'm going to show you our actual finished salt. I'm going to, there we go. There it is. So you can see how the color's different, right? It's a little darker, and there's a little flecks of these dry, but they're all dry. It's a little flecks of that stuff is going to get in there, which is totally fine. That's what you want. So this is going to go in our sieve here. And
Julie said she's got a new DIY gift idea. I think that's great. Gifting
this is a great idea.
Always awesome.
I cannot tell you, Julie, how many times we have done. We do citrus salts all the time. We do big events. We've done Austin Food Wine Fest. We've fed about 6,000 people in 2 days. Love to do flavored salts. If you're going to make a citrus salt, same way. I'm going to put a glove on here so I don't get all my salt in my wounds. It's never good. We've done it where you take a bunch of citrus zest and you mix it with the salt. And I typically use about a cup of salt. So if you wanted to make a citrus zest at home, I would take about 3 lemons, 1 lime, maybe an orange and a grapefruit, and zest all that and put it into a cup of salt and just mix it and mash it, and you will be amazed at the amount of oil that will leach out of the salt, because the salt, again, it's going to pull out all the moisture in those essential oils, and then you just leave it there, and all the zest dries up in the salt. It's unbelievable on anything, fish, anything. Sorry, you can kind of see this up top here. I'll get my fat head out of the way. You can see, like, now I'm just kind of left with these vegetables, right? So kind of cool. If you were at a restaurant and you were cooking for a restaurant, I would use these vegetables probably as a garnish for my soup, just because they're dried. They've all been kind of roasted and it has a little crunchiness. And you've got that, they're already kind of pre-salted. Again, they've been soaking in the salt, so it'd be a nice little garnish. So if you want to keep this, you can. I'm not going to. I'm going to pitch this. There goes that. So there's our salt. So you can see here what I've done. You can see those little flecks, and I'm okay with that. If you don't want the flecks, obviously you can go a little finer on your mesh, is fine. But I'm totally happy with it. The smell is ridiculous. If you could only smell the fact of, just imagine all those caramelized vegetables. All right, I've got my salt over here. There's an extra one somebody would take home.
It smells like Thanksgiving in here.
It has like imagine if you took a bunch of vegetables and put them over salt and roasted them for a long amount of time. That's what it smells like. Okay, so the conserva. So now the salt we had to do ahead of time, because I want to make sure you got to see the whole effect. Now the conserva. So what is a conserva? So it's an Italian word that just means we're just going to preserve it. So the way we're going to preserve it is we're going to cook it, or the French have a similar term called confit, which means to cook in oil. So it's the same kind of thing, or same kind of process, where we're going to take our tomatoes. So I've got these flavor bombs. You can see them up top here. The thing I love about the flavor bombs is that the stems of the tomatoes are still attached. We're going to use everything. We're not going to throw away the stems. We're not going to pick the tomatoes. You want the stems on there. So the flavor bombs will go right into our... Now, you can use any kind of Pyrex dish, any kind of, like this is our kitchen and table, what's it called? This is the oblong, rectangular.
Casserole.
Has a name, casserole, baking, whatever you want to call it. But there's a lot of different sizes in our kitchen table. Both are going to go in. So why the stem, Scott? Great question. I'm glad you're here, Scott. Well, I'm so happy to be back. So we want the stems is because the stems, the stems have great flavor. So typically when I'll make a stock, or if I want to do a soup or something, or make anything like that, where we want to add flavor to it, I'll use the stems. So stems of cilantro, stems of parsley have a lot of concentrated flavor. There's a lot of tomato flavor in our stems, so I'm going to leave them in there. I'll pull them out afterwards anyway, so it's okay. Only other ingredients you're going to get is a little bit of thyme. I use 7 to 8 sprigs of thyme. I like a little more thyme in this. I think it adds really well. Some crushed red pepper flakes, which if you don't like heat or it's for the kids, just omit that. And then I have the shallots. So I'm using recipe calls for about 7 to 10 or 8 to 10 medium-sized shallots. This is what I consider kind of a medium-sized shallot. You can see my hand. I have very small hands. Not really. I don't have very small hands at all. Those are actually medium. This is what I would call a larger shallot. So if you're going to do that, if you can only find larger shallots, don't worry about it. Just cut them into quarters and it's fine. I cut these in half, which is why I get this. So these just go right on top. Again, this is going to cook for a good long time. So I just want to have enough to kind of, cover everything and give flavor. The flavor of this, I can tell you, is amazing. So I was just going to use our regular salt, but because I have the mirepoix salt, I'm going to season it with the mirepoix salt. Now, when it comes to oil, I'm going to cover this in oil. What's that?
Layering the flavor.
Layering the flavor. That's exactly right. So I've got Macavio olive oil, and it's about 2 to 3 cups. So a bottle to maybe a little bit more. I've taken the top off to make this easier to pour. So why so much oil? Can you do less of this? Yes, you can. However, this will soak up a lot of oil, and you just want enough to cover. Actually, this right here, once this starts to cook, everything will start to kind of shrink, right? And there'll be some juice from this because we gave it a bit of seasoning that'll also kind of start to shrink a little bit, so it'll kind of be in the oil. This gets covered with foil, and it gets put in the oven, and it just goes for a long time. Now, the best way to do both the mirepoix salt and the conserva, if I'm going to be completely honest, the recipe is great. It'll give a great desired effect. But for us, since you're watching, I want to say that I like to do these overnight. So I'll set my oven to like 195 to 200 degrees max. Don't go any hotter than that, 200 degrees. And do the exact same preparation, cover them, and put them in the oven. I did 2 of them last night together. I put them in at like 10 o'clock at night. And at the morning, the smell of your house is amazing. It'll permeate. It's like you've been cooking in a country restaurant for like all day. Like
so Chef, you said 190 degrees overnight?
About 195 to 200 degrees all night long. And just lights off, let it sit in there and let it do its thing. By the time you get out, it's like the caramelization that'll happen during that time, just low and slow, is fantastic. So it's a great make ahead. And it's also kind of a zero stress thing. And if you're worried about leaving your oven on, I've done it for years. And so far, nothing's happened yet, right?
So could we potentially do this in a crock pot, slow
You could,
cooker?
yeah. You just got to be careful. Crock pots they can have hot spots, and they can
Yeah.
be really different. So you just want to make sure if you're doing it, yes, you can do it on low heat. If you have an Instapot, I probably wouldn't use an Instapot, but you could use a crock pot if you have one. Just put it on the low setting and let it go. For the salt, again, just even at like if you were going to use this all day, if you're worried about leaving it, if you work from home all day, put it in the early in the morning at like 170 to 180, and just let it sit all day long. And then you come back and you'll see like once it starts to get caramelized, you're there. Okay, so that's that. So those 2 are working. So the conserva is going. I've got it in a different pot. You'll see it when it comes out. All the great flavor that's there, and we'll put it together. So right now we're going to make the mac and mornay. So the mac and mornay, I'd like to buy a vowel, please. There we go. Mac and mornay, it's a mouthful, man, I'm telling you. All right, so we've got some ingredients here. So classic bechamel, like we talked about. 3 ingredients typically, butter or some kind of oil, the flour, and then the milk, and that's it. And then typically in Italy, if they're making a bechamel for something like a pasta or fettuccine, sometimes they add some fresh grated nutmeg. Sometimes they'll add garlic to it and saute it. I'm going to do onion because I want the aromatics in my mac and cheese. So the basis of this, I think most people think of mac and cheese, they think of like the good yellow cheese. My water's boiling over here. I'm going to show you this too. We got a couple different camera setups. Super excited to show you. It's just going to be me not forgetting to talk to both cameras and be thinking I've got to talk to one. So I've got that in my head. That's just for me. That's not for you. So most mac and cheese in America, typically we notice the Velveeta, right? The Kraft mac and cheese, which has the beautiful annatto, that really orange that we always kind of go, that's what mac and cheese should look like. So a typical bechamel in a Mornay sauce would be way more, I think, cloud white because of the fact that we're using the Gruyere cheese. Gruyere cheese is obviously a white cheese. It's a little bit more of that shade. So if we were to do just the classic and have that Gruyere in there, it would be much more of that kind of white style mac and cheese sauce. Now, because you have kids at home who immediately may see the mac and cheese and appreciate all the love and attention you put into making the roux from scratch and doing all this and go, I don't want it because it's not orange. I've added a couple different cheeses, and you can absolutely customize this. You can leave out the Gruyere cheese if you want to altogether and just do like a couple different cheeses. So in order to please all the palates, I've kind of got the Gruyere because I want that for the nuttiness. So try it, and if you don't like it, you can always go back to a different cheese. But the Gruyere has a really nice nuttiness. It melts really good. I've got just a simple mild cheddar, again, for the color. And I'm using a Colby Jack. Colby Jack's always that it's the cheese, it's always like, I got it, I'll do it, because it's like, it always goes well at every part, because it's like, it just has like a good flavor, and it's not too offensive, it's not too sharp, it's not too whatever.
You just compared
I'll
Colby
do it.
Jack cheese
I got
to like
it. Like
a
he's that
passive
cheese.
aggressive.
All right. That's the cheese. Who doesn't want to do that cheese? It's fine. I got this.
And
I'll just
there's
do it.
some adults that won't eat it if it's not.
It's true. I get it. You know, I totally agree. But you gotta at least try it. I mean, if we're doing a new year, new you, it's time to try a little something different. So typically, making a roux, equal parts oil and fat. Or equal parts oil and fat. Nope, that didn't work. Equal parts oil and flour or butter and flour. So I'm using butter because I want it to be rich. So the butter goes in. Now I'm going to wait on the flour for a second. So that's 2 ounces of butter. It's a half a stick. I know it says divided use, but we're going to do it all at once because we're going to add some truffle butter at the end of this. Now, if you're like Charlotte, you don't want truffle butter, just omit the truffle butter and go with all the butter and you'll be fine. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to do the butter first. I'm going to hop over here so you can see this. A couple different camera angles. So the onions are going to go in. Now, I'm going to show you as I cook my pasta. I'm going to turn my water all the way up here to get my water boiling. As you're cooking pasta, 2 of my things that I will tell you that you have to have. You have to have salt in the water. Always salt the water. If you're worried about salting the water, I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. I'm going to risk my own hand to do it, and I'll show you. Don't do this at home. This is my HEB disclaimer. So that was a good amount of salt, right? Reason being is I have a giant pot here, as you can see. It's full of water. So I want to make sure the water, when we're cooking the pasta, it soaks up some of that salt because I don't want to have to keep adding all the salt at the end. It's always weird. If you're going to pre-salt the water, you're going to, so here's what I'm going to do. In the boiling water, I'm going to taste it. So it's good and salty, so it's ready to go. So
Didn't you tell me one time, like the ocean?
That's how I learned. Look, when I cooked, one of the first restaurants I cooked at was an Italian restaurant, and it was always salted like the ocean. Now, not the Dead Sea Ocean, but just the ocean. So those of you that know the Dead Sea, ever been to the Dead Sea, you know that's pretty salty water. So you don't want to cook your pasta in that, but you definitely want to have some flavor. I added a little bit of salt to the onions. Again, I just want to pull out some of the moisture and then the butter's going. Now, you can cook the onions. Here's my disclaimer for your aromatics. If you don't want to do onions, you could throw garlic in there. If you want to do no garlic and you want to do shallots, you could do any of those combinations will work in this. It kind of depends on what you want. I do love garlic and mac and cheese, but I want to kind of go with a base layer because I'm doing the mornay. So I'm going to do just a little bit of aromatic, which is my onion. So if you want to caramelize this, fantastic. But just know that when you caramelize it, it'll also change the color of the bechamel when you're done. So just know that. So I'm going to just kind of sweat these. I'm going to add the flour. I'm just using all-purpose flour. I know if you watched the couple of other classes we did last year about talking about flour and the different kinds and using cake flour for biscuits and using all-purpose flour. This is just an all-purpose. It doesn't really matter. We're just going to make a little paste here. Every time I do this, I don't know if anybody's ever made pot au choux. We'll have to do that as a class. It's a lot of fun to do. Pot au choux is a dough that they make that's also, it's like so counterintuitive because you're going to fill a big pot with butter and milk or butter and water, and then you add a bunch of flour to it, and it all just becomes like this clumping mess, and you cook it out. So for the roux, I'm going to turn down my heat just a touch. So the roux, now I've got my flour in, I've got my butter in, could I just add the milk? Yes, you can. However, I have not cooked all the flour flavor out, so when it's done, you're going to have a lot of that flour, like, you ever tasted something with your like, it's a flavor in that that's kind of that raw flour, which you don't want. So for typical, like a bechamel like this, you'd want to kind of, I would call it a blonde color.
Yeah.
I like to go a little bit further. I like to call it a California tan, which is like, it just has a little bit more color than I would say like a blonde roux. And those that make gumbo at home, you make roux all the time, you know that the difference that a roux can make in the flavor, the darker it is. So those that make gumbo, you do a dark roux. And those of you that make gumbo at home, God bless you, because I don't even attempt it because I get so tired of stirring the roux, and as soon as you like walk away for a second, you're like, oh, let me just do this, and it's like, oh, it's burned. Let me start over again. 45-minute process. So this is not quite that long. This is just a little. Again, this is going to be made right before your very eyes here. So the
it's
roux
like the
is
consistency of like wet sand.
It is. You can kind of see like so if I'm going to show like the camera right here, like you can. I guess I can show the one up top, right? So many camera angles. It's gotten so fancy now. All right, so you can see it's kind of, a little bit like wet sand. I wouldn't call that quite a California tan yet. I'd say we're getting close. My water is seasoned. I'm going to use my bucatini over here. Now, I do have some pre-cooked. This is my favorite way to do this. I want to make sure I can show you. I don't know if it's better, this one or this one. What do you think, Rob? Here? Probably here. All right, we'll do that.
Either one works, Chef.
So
there you go.
What is bucatini? Bucatini is a pasta. This is our bronze cut organic Central Market bucatini. It's a fantastic pasta. So I would call a bucatini, if I had to describe it, it's like a thicker, more muscular spaghetti with a slight hole in the middle of it because it's a bigger noodle. It's really, really good. And when it says bronze cut on it, bronze cut in Italy, they cut the pasta in these big factories. Imagine big, hundreds of thousands of pounds of semolina flour and water getting mixed and going through an extruder. The bronze cut versus a regular cut gives you that little texture on the outside of the pasta, and you can't see it, otherwise I'd show it to you. But when you buy it, you'll notice when you just get regular spaghetti versus like a bronze cut, the bronze cut dies they use are actually bronze, and it actually makes this texture of the pasta, which holds more sauce, which is what you want. So here we go. There we go. That's how you open that up. And then I just, like the phone book, we're going to
show off. You're showing off.
We're going to break it in half. Well, I want it to be
showing
easily eaten, so we're going to do.
Yeah.
Also, it worked out today. No big deal. So it's going to cook. Now, for those of you that are wondering, do I need to cook this a little more al dente? I would. The directions on the bucatini say about 9 to 11 minutes. I go about 9, and then I'll pull out of the water. I'll leave the water sitting there. I'll just pull it out and just add it to like a bowl or something, kind of set it aside. I don't want to rinse it off. Don't rinse your pasta. Unless you're trying to make like pasta salad, don't rinse your pasta. Because you want that starch to kind of form the emulsion that's going to help this whole thing come together. So don't rinse it. And if you're going to put your, if you're like me, normally at home you put your colander in the sink, and then you just pour it over the sink and let it out, fine. Just don't rinse it. Let it stay there. If it starts to get sticky or you worry about because there's starch on it will get sticky, just throw a little olive oil on it and kind of toss it together and it'll stay. That's exactly what I did. Okay, so my roux is going here. I just want to show you just how easy this is. So if you can see from the top, and eventually I'm going to switch to a whisk. Actually, I may not. I'm going to add a little bit of milk in. So I'm going to turn up my heat.
And is that whole milk or?
This is whole milk and half and half.
Okay.
So it's 2 cups of half and half, 1 cup of whole milk. Why are we doing that? Because you deserve it. You've been working hard. If you want to just use milk, you can. Now, earlier, Charlotte, we talked about for those of you, see how it just became like a big pulpy mass? That's all right. We're going to continue to add the milk to it. It's going to continue to thin out a little bit. Now, I'm adding 3 cups of cheese. I added about a third a cup of flour, 2 ounces of butter, and 3 cups of the actual liquid. If you like it thicker or thinner, once you've learned this skill, just dial back the amount of either flour or just add more or less of the liquid if you want it really, really thick. But I think this is a nice consistency once you kind of do it. So try it like this, and you can always, switch it up later.
Oh, you can see the flour thickening the.
Yeah, so you can see it, right? So I can like draw my little line in there. So I'm going to go ahead and now that I've kind of got it all done, I'm just going to go ahead and add all of these cast iron pans. So I just want you to know, if you do a lot of cast iron cooking, now why cast iron versus the grill? Well, reason being is I want to make sure that we're using ribeye steaks. Ribeyes historically have a lot of fat to them. So when you put a ribeye steak on the grill, anybody that's ever cooked a ribeye steak on the grill knows that you have to kind of worry about some flare-ups and things like that. Everybody knows when you put a steak on a really hot grill, if it's got a high amount of fat, you'll get that like black acrid smoke kind of coming up, and that's not what we want. We want to make sure we don't like burn it and have that little spot that's all kind of burned, and then we got to figure out who we're going to give that piece to, right? We're like, you know what? I think my mom likes hers a little more well done. Let's do that.
You told me that was rustic, chef.
Exactly. So the cast iron skillet is great for searing steaks simply because you can, don't worry about this looking like there's some bits and pieces in there. This will all calm down. Those are some of the onions as well. So if you're thinking it's bits of flour, this will all kind of do its thing. I'm just going to let that sit for a minute. The cast iron's great because when we're cooking steak in cast iron, you cook meat in cast iron or anything in cast iron, it gets a beautiful sear. We don't have to worry about it flaring up or doing whatever. We're just going to sear it, and then we'll let it go. And I'll give you some tips and tricks on kind of how to kind of guess your steak doneness. For care and cleaning of cast iron, we're going to put up some tips that I'll show you that'll be in the screen here next to me. Don't ever throw your cast iron in a dishwasher. If you do, just throw it right in the trash, and then you can start over again with a new one. Cast iron is seasoned really well. Cast iron's seasoned really well. It's true. I hate to say it, but it's really true.
You can re-season it.
It's like if you've ever bought a salt block, like we sell those great Himalayan salt blocks, and then somebody goes, I put it in my dishwasher, and it disappeared. And you're like, well, it's salt, so you can't wash it without it disappearing, right? So it's little things like that. Stick with me, I'm telling you, I got this. So you want to make sure that the way I clean mine is once I'm done doing whatever I'm going to do, I'll just add some salt to the pan, and you can add a little warm water, and I just scrub it out, either with a brush or just with a towel. For the most part, you don't want to go crazy with abrasive soaps. You don't want to soak it for a long amount of time because it'll rust in a second on you. So you want to make sure that if you're cleaning it out, the best way to do it is to just a little bit of salt to get the abrasive off. If there's little bits in the pan, which there will be, do it. And at the end, once you're done, you can either dry it off completely or put it back on the stove over low heat and just let it dry naturally over the heat. And then always, because you want to keep building the seasoning of the pan, which is also, the seasoning of the pan, when I say that, is also the non-stick. of the pan. You know, back in the day, you know, your great grandma and grandma didn't have Teflon coating for their eggs. They used cast iron was the original nonstick. Charlotte said earlier, it was the original nonstick.
So you know what I use to oil my cast iron is the spray, the Altavio spray canola.
Perfect.
I'm like, I just do.
You mean this stuff, Charlotte?
Yes.
Gratuitous plug. I just happen to have that on me because it was here. All right, so I'm going to. This is about ready to go. So I'm going to turn my bechamel down. Now, can you see this where it's like? I don't want to burn it here.
It's like
I forget
smooth,
that when you cook on these stoves, they're like, you know, 45 to 50,000 BTUs, so they burn stuff quickly. So you want to make sure, this is my disclaimer, because if I were to walk away and start doing something, there's a lot of dairy in here, obviously. And so milk, obviously on a stove, unattended, will boil over. So stay close to this when you're doing this.
Oh, like that time you made the potatoes? Oh, sorry.
Oh, what's that? Say it again.
Nothing, never mind.
Yes, I have no idea what you're talking about. No, that never happened. Never happened. You'll see it's starting to get thicker here in a second. I'm going to let that cook. I'm just going to keep that over low heat, let that do its thing, developing lots of flavor. Now, I could add more salt to this, and I should add more salt to it, but I also know that my water is salty enough to where I'm not going to add any extra salt to this. I'm going to let the pasta flavor this. Plus, I have all this cheese. Now, there's also different layers or levels of the salt and cheese. So if you're going to use something like, if you want to make something really cool, make it like Italian, and you want like a pecorino romano or Parmesan, just know those are definitely saltier cheeses. So just a kind of a watch out is you don't want to go crazy adding a bunch of salt, because if you add a really salty cheese, it's going to take up your, but I mean, it's mac and cheese. If it's salty, it's like, you just follow a little more,
I'm in
a little more wine, right?
I'm in it.
So do you see how I'm dragging the spatula and you can see a little bit of that thing? So we're getting closer to that. Now the cheese, I was going to thicken this up. Oh, I'm going to tell you before I got sidetracked. To make this gluten-free, we do sell gluten-free pasta at H-E-B. There's a lot of gluten-free. If you want to get away from having to make a roux, this is my hack for gluten-free. Cook your gluten-free pasta just like we're doing here. And then instead of using the roux in the butter, I would saute the onions solo. So again, a little bit of fat, a little bit of butter, whatever, saute the onions solo. And then with the cheese, for every 2 cups of cheese, I add about a half a tablespoon of cornstarch. Toss the cornstarch in the cheese. Why toss the cornstarch in the cheese and mix it all up so it coats it? If you were to add cornstarch right to that mixture with the milk, you probably will get a big clump of cornstarch trying to get it all, you know, whisked out. So if it's on the cheese, you're going to evenly distribute it. It'll coat it, and then you can just throw it in here. Bam! How about that? Gluten-free. So if you're on the kick, is everybody still sticking to their New Year's resolutions? I know I'm not. But you know what? I always try to just do the best. See that? See how that's looking? Not to call it attention away. See how it's kind of, see how I can make a little wave?
It's like velvet.
Parting the bechamel. All right, so we're almost there. I'm going to add the cheese in just a second. I'm going to start talking about the steaks real fast while that's going. Move back over to this camera here. Dun, dun, dun.
I'll watch the sauce.
Yeah, will you? My dairy and my pasta?
Yeah.
So here are my grass-fed ribeyes. Now, like I said, each ribeye is a little bit different. So we talk about cooking steak. I know people sometimes are a little more intimidated about cooking fish or cooking lobster or scallops, something, because it's, you know, it can be hard to do. I'm switching back over. I'm seeing some bubbling. So here we go. So you see how this is now? See how I can draw a line with that? See how it's nice and thick? That's how my cheese goes in. Cheese goes in, all the Gruyere, the poor Colby Jack that's like, I'll take it. I got it. I'll just bring up the rear and get all the stuff so it all melts evenly. Make sure everybody's happy. So if it's too thick, I'm also going to show you a trick. If I feel like my mac and cheese is too thick, just add a little more half and half. Don't add milk. I want to be a little bit thicker with this. This is definitely your night off. This is a cheat night. So, you know, we're Steakhouse. We're going big, right? Nobody goes to Steakhouse just to get a salad, right? And if you do, no disrespect. Okay, so I'm going to add just a touch of half and half. I mean, this is how much, that's about a tablespoon. I'm just going to give it a little whisk here. See how beautiful and thick that is? Look at that. Ooh. It's like mashed potatoes. That's what you typically want with your mac and cheese. So I went ahead and pre-cooked some bucatini. I did myself a solid. Past me, took care of future me. So here we go. I'm going to add my pasta. So all I did was add a little bit of olive oil to this. It's cooked most of the way. So you just break it up. Easy, easy. Let's just add that whole thing. Yeah. You know, we wondered about whether this pot would fit all this stuff. I'm about to find out the hard way. All right, I'm going to move my dishes out of the way here. All right, so that pasta is going to continue to cook. I'm going to let that go just as a science experiment because I don't need that pasta to see just how long it takes to be really, really just starts to fall apart and become like a stew. a pasta stew. All right, so I'm going to switch over to my, let's go to my tongs here. Be really, really careful. Again, I got a pan here that I don't want to really scratch. So there's enough heat in the pan here where I don't feel like I need to go crazy, like, you know, turning up the heat and doing whatever. I just want to make sure I reheat the pasta. And then I'm going to put a lid on this, and then I'll cook the steaks, and I'll show you how we're going to bring it all together. So did that make sense? Was that easy enough? Like, I mean, a bechamel is really easy. It's flour, it was the milk, and it was the butter, or whatever fat you want to use. And then look at how stinking.
Giovanna says it makes perfect sense to her.
Look how stinking thick this is. That's like, I'm going to get rid of these too. I'm going to go back to the spatula. So look at this. It's like, now typically I use bucatini just because, but obviously if you were using like a shell pasta or like an orecchiette or something like that, like a smaller, like an elbow, which I think is more typical, which is great, but it's Steakhouse. We're going to throw a little twist in here. Mostly just because I wanted to torture myself with trying to make bucatini in the mac and cheese here, but it's going to be delicious and it'll look nice plated next to it versus our little shells. So look at how, holy moly, right?
That's beautiful.
That's a mac and cheese right there.
Okay, so I could eat it like that, right? Like if I couldn't wait.
100%. You could eat this right now, just like this. And we'll check the seasoning, but I have a feeling we're not going to need much, if anything. I can garnish it with a little bit of black pepper if we wanted to, but see how it's like a nice kind of like, it's not completely white, but it just has more of that white hue to it. Again, if you wanted to change this, make it darker, use that cheese. You can just use our, we also have that fantastic cheese in the market called the, what's it called? The case of the blue thing. Sounds like 2 words.
Oh.
Queso? Nope, that's not it. It's what's the word? It's such a good cheese. Use it everywhere. American, what is it called? The American mix. We did it on Casarecce.
Tex-Mex cheese?
No, the blue comes in the blue package. It's like a blue. We had the T-shirts made.
The Tex-Mex cheese.
Tex-Mex cheese. That's what it is. Man.
Your California's showing. Tex-Mex cheese is a perfect blend of
Tex-Mex.
American and cheddar. It is my favorite cheese.
And if you were to use 3 cups of that in this, you would have your classic kind of like yellow,
very all-American,
orangish
yes,
mac
so
and
good.
cheese. But since we're doing a level upscale, we got to have that Gruyere. And I promise you, the Gruyere. Even if you're not a fan of it, if you were just to eat the Gruyere, this is what I imagine people doing. When you get it home, and you're like, whether you have the grated or the block and you just grate it, you get home and you taste it and you're like, I hate it. It's too sharp or it's too whatever. Just try it and mix it in because I promise it gets along really, really well with its more American counterparts. All right, and that's what we need, right? More cohesiveness. Okay, so let's do cauliflower steaks. I'm gonna move back over here. We're gonna talk about steaks. All right, so the mac and cheese is done. I'm gonna put on my gloves here. So this is the whole thing. So pan searing a steak. We're gonna make it really fancy. We're gonna do a little basting of the steak in the cast iron. I'm also gonna cook the cauliflower right next to it here. How much time do I have left? Is there time?
You have about 20 minutes.
20 minutes?
Yeah.
Plenty of time, plenty of time. Again, so for doneness of the steak, this is what I'm gonna tell you not to do. I would invest, we talked about thermometers and things. We did the roast beef a couple classes ago. If you haven't checked it out, you can go to the YouTube channel, check it out. We talked about probe thermometer. It's good to invest in a probe thermometer. The way we do it at restaurants, the way we've done it is usually you just get so much experience cooking. If you're a good steak cooker, fantastic. Cooking on a grill and cooking in a pan though can be a little bit different. So just know that. But the way they would check, typically they would teach you, would be to like clasp your fingers. So this would be push the flesh of your thumb. Everybody push the flesh of your thumb. So you
I'm doing
push
it
down,
right now, actually.
and you would connect the fingers. This would be like a rare to like blue. The problem with this theory is, and you go up the way, so that's like medium rare, medium well, and then well done. Like you can feel the resistance on your thumb. The problem is every steak is different. So I don't recommend doing it that way because you may go, oh, this steak is really like, this is a thinner piece of our grass-fed steak. It's not as, this one's a little bit thicker, like, so they're all different. So when you start pushing on it, you go, well, this feels like it's well done already. Well, it could be old, it could be just thin, it could be the fact that it's cold. So there's a bunch of different things. So I always say invest in a probe thermometer and just practice makes perfect. So you can definitely try doing it this way, but I feel like it's just better to trust the probe thermometer and not guess at it. I'm gonna show you how I do it when I start cooking mine. So I've got a couple of our grass-fed steaks here. I'm gonna pick this guy because he's really pretty. And I'm gonna pick the guy underneath this one because I like him too. All right, here's 2 steaks. I'm gonna do 2 because, you know, it's us. So I'm gonna move these back over. What am I gonna do with all those ribeye steaks? All right, so the mirepoix salt. So this is where I would say good salt and pepper is all a really good steak needs. Again, it's grass-fed. So I'm going to season it with our mirepoix salt. Again, the mirepoix salt has all that carrot, celery, and onion, so it's going to give it a really beautiful baseline flavor, and it's just a fun skill to have. And then, of course, a good amount of cracked pepper. Now, what I'm going to show you next is something you really should do, which is press. Press the seasoning into the steak. Because I got to walk the steaks over the stove, I got to flip the steaks a couple times, the seasoning's going to fall off. So season more than you think you do, depending on the thickness. Now, if it's a really thick cut piece, imagine these guys were together here. That's a thick piece. I would season the heck out of that. Now we press it in, flip it over. Again, I lost some seasoning when I flipped it over. A generous seasoning of the mirepoix salt.
You know, just saying mirepoix salt, like that just makes you sound like that's like level up.
Du,
like you
mirepoix.
just like increased your
Charlotte,
your
mirepoix.
street
Very
cred.
easy. Okay, here we go. I don't know what accent that was. That probably wasn't French, but it was so close. You know. So close. All right, so a good amount of salt and pepper. Done really, really simply, just like that. Okay, so I've got a hot pan. So now, here's my other disclaimer. I totally understand that when we are fighting time like crazy. So mom, dad, you're picking up kids, whatever it is, you got practice, whatever's going on. Sometimes you don't always have optimum conditions to cook dinner in. So I was able to let my steaks rest, which I recommend for at least 20 to 25 minutes at room temperature. That way, if I take a cold steak to a screaming hot pan, I'm going to have a beautiful sear, but by the time I flip it and try and sear it again, it'll be burned by the time I get the internal temperature to the external temperature, being the fact that it's cold. I can get that sear really quick, but you'll have that still cold interior. If you have to do that, and you are time-starved like most of us, and you're like, look, Scott, I can't let it sit out for 30 minutes, totally okay. Here's the cheat. So start doing the same thing. Pull out your steaks in the fridge, get them out, season them real well, let them sit, and then while your pan's preheating, you can let them sit. If that's only 5 minutes, fantastic. We're going to sear it on one side like we will. As soon as you flip it, you will add the butter and thyme, give it a little baste, finish it in the oven. That way you'll get a much more even heat, and that way by the time it's done, you won't just have this like, you know, that carbon like bottom where it's like, Jimmy, this is your piece. There you go. Like, so we want to make sure we do it. So the oven is a great cheat. So if that makes sense. All right. I don't know who Jimmy is. That was just an arbitrary name I just threw out.
You're super funny tonight, Scott Tompkins.
Am I? Well, we're cooking steak. You know, I mean, you got to have fun at Steakhouse, right? Got to have good conversation. Okay, so my steaks are, these are ready to go. I'm going to move this out of the way, and I'm going to show you my cauliflower steaks. So here's where, if you are trying to be good and you're like, look, Scott, I gave up red meat. Help me out. I got you. I got you right here. Where's my cauliflower? Here it is. Okay, so we'll take a nice giant head of cauliflower. I'm going to do the exact same thing with this. So I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. I'm going to get my little paring knife. Don't go, when you're making cauliflower steaks, don't go super far in and cut this. We need this intact. That's what's going to hold all this structure together. And just kind of peel these guys off of here. Peel them off, peel them off. And then we're going to cut the steaks. Now you can go as thick or as thin as you want. I prefer to go a little bit thicker. Cauliflower, though it's really a, you know, very, I would say a very cruciferous vegetable. What is that word? What's the word I'm looking for?
Hardy.
Boisterous? Hardy. There you go. Hardy vegetable.
It's a very cruciferous vegetable.
You know, like most cruciferous is very, very hardy. So I'm going to take off some of the ends. Save these. Saute those in leftover mix that you've got. So I'm going to cut this in a little bit thicker. Now, true, you will only get a couple of cauliflower steaks per cauliflower. Absolutely correct. This is what you want, that big kind of fat piece of cauliflower. So maybe you get 2, maybe you get 3, depending on how thick you cut them. I'm going to try and get just 2 out of this bad boy. So now I have all this, which is still great, but the problem is this will fall apart as soon as I do it. I love to sear cauliflower the way I'm going to show you, and I'm going to show you exactly how I do it. So I'm going to bring these over here. I've already got a plate. I'm going to put these with my other guys. This is going to be so much fun. I hope you get so much value out of these techniques. I hope. All right, I just made a giant mess. So here's where I get my rolling trash can in the picture. So we're going to do a little sear of, close your eyes. Okay, there we go. All right, so this is all going away. I don't have any use for it right now. I got plenty of cauliflower ready to go. I'm going to compost all of that in my trash can. All right, here we go. Steaks. Everybody's walking over here. We're going right over to the heat. I've got my steaks on here. So I'm going to add a little bit of fat, but I'm not going to add the fat to the pan. Reason being is because I don't want this to burn. These are nice and hot. I have these set over. Honestly, you want to preheat your cast iron to about medium low to low heat. Because
hey,
cast
Scott,
iron is a huge... Yes, ma'am.
Julie wants to know if we sell cauliflower
steaks.
Steaks.
We do not. But as I just showed you, it's really, really simple to make your own cauliflower steaks. I wish we could. Maybe that's something that's in the hat for 2021.
I'm making a note.
Make notes?
I'm making a note
Making
right now
note.
for
Okay.
things I'd like
So
to see.
you saw I sprayed my steak with this. I would usually just brush a little bit of oil on. I don't want to add oil to here because then it's immediately, I know this is preheated. It'll start immediately smoking, so brush your steaks with it.
Do you remember
and
that
then-
time I started that fire by
I
adding...
do remember. I was in the back working, and I remember being like, is that on fire? Is she on fire? You know what? It all worked out.
in front of everybody
These
at
things are
Austin
going to
Food
happen.
and Wine Festival.
So right now, if I went to move this steak, this is what's going to happen. It's going to tell me it doesn't want to move, right? It's stuck. Let it be. Do not touch it. Don't move it. Don't do anything. Now, for the cauliflower, because while the steaks are cooking over nice and low heat, I'm going to get my conserva out, and I'm going to set it on this towel right here, because I'm going to use the oil from the conserva with the cauliflower. That's how we're going to do that. So I'm going to put out my, you know what would have been really awesome? I almost grabbed that with my hand, not thinking that this is what happens when you're in a real show, live. Can we edit that out? We can't. That's all right. So this goes away because I don't need that anymore. Thank you for your service, lid. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. In a little bowl here, I've got a spoon. I'm just going to get a little bit of
so
this.
Beautiful.
I'm going to put it back on here so you can see it. I don't want to kind of give away the whole thing yet. But I'm just going to take some of the oil. That's what's going to be used in my cast iron pan. So I'm going to put a little bit of oil in this. See how it's sizzling automatically? Look at this. Bam. Now, mirepoix salt. I'm also going to use that again. Why? Because we have it, and I'm going to take advantage of it. Right over the top. Now, I'm not going to move, and if you ever grab cast iron, just know, use a towel, because it's very, very hot. I'm going to let this sit here and cook. This is on really, really low heat, and the amount of sizzle I'm getting out of both of these is incredible. Again, because cast iron is such a great conductor. My mac and cheese, still chilling. My pasta hasn't quite become mush yet, but I'm going to let it go. All right. So now I'm going to add a little bit of butter or a little more oil to this, and I'm going to baste the cauliflower. How am I going to do that? So I'm going to take my spoon, and I'm going to do this for my steak as well. I'm going to kind of tilt the pan here. I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to tilt the pan, and I'm going to kind of see a little tomato skin in there. So this will allow me to kind of cook the top of my cauliflower while I'm cooking the bottom of the cauliflower. That makes sense? And so I'm going to do this to the steaks as soon as I flip them, just so I can make sure they're nice and hot. But I want all that beautiful flavor on my cauliflower steak here. Again, this oil is smoking hot, so it's already going to start to kind of seep into the cauliflower and continue to cook it. I can't wait for you to see the amount of caramelization you're going to get on this. So how do I know when the steak's to flip? If I were to touch it now, it's raw, feels raw, and I'd be right. But I'm going to wait until I can start to move it around. I'm going to give it a little more time. This one's still, see how it's kind of sticking? Just let it alone. Let it go. If you need to add more oil, you can. I'm not going to have you add the butter now because I don't want it to burn. Again, depending on how thick the steak is, you don't want that brown, because there's a difference between brown butter and burned butter. Do not burn the butter. So that's why we're going to flip it over, and then we'll lower the heat even more, and there's enough heat in the pan to where we'll kind of finish cooking this. I'm going to turn up just a little bit. Again, I am using a grass-fed steak. If you're using prime is going to have a lot more fat. You're probably going to get a lot more sizzle out of this because there is a lot more of the actual fat here. Where I'm using grass-fed, this seems to be a little bit leaner. All right, so this is going to be still going here. Again, mirepoix salt, conserva oil on the cauliflower is going to completely turn this dish into a, not just a piece of cauliflower, I promise you. It'll turn into like a mega piece of cauliflower. Bam, bam, bam.
It smells so good in here.
It does smell really good.
So did you add a little bit of that conserva oil to your steak
I
as
did.
well,
I add
Chef?
a little bit to that. I use it on everything, and I apologize, Jay. You're going to have to keep watching me go back and forth. I'm going to fill up a little more oil in here because I'm telling you, this stuff is gold, and you can use it on anything. Now, to store the conserva oil, yes, ma'am, you got a question?
Oh, no, go ahead, Chef.
No, I was going to say, you can store the conserva oil in just a little container and put it in the refrigerator and then use it anytime you want to. Just let it slack out before you actually use it.
And tell the folks at home what slack out means.
Slack out means like let it come to room temperature, so it'll like kind of melt. Now, Charlotte, tell your tip about when we do conserva a lot of times for events. What you like to do once it's refrigerated, what do? You scrape off the top?
I just scrape the oil straight off the top. So like as
So
it
good.
cools, the oil will solidify on top and all the good juices and tomato and shallot will stay at the bottom. And
Yep.
I literally just scrape that like fat right off the top and smear it on toast. Like
Delicious.
it's so good.
There's my
You can also
thyme.
use it for like to drizzle on a salad.
Yeah, it is really good. So I've got my thyme standing by because I'm about to do the flip for both of these. Actually, I won't do the flip yet for the cauliflower, but I'm about to flip the steak, and I'm going to add my butter into the steak. Oh my gosh. Okay, so finishing butter. What is this? So at HEB, if you've been to an HEB, most HEBs will carry this, especially ones with a cooking connection. Where all the regular butter is, and the sour cream and everything, there's our dairy section where all the butter is, of cultured creams and all that stuff. You can get our normal butters, and then it has up at the top, there are these little canisters of finishing butters. I'm using the black and white truffle, so it does have white truffle in it for you there, chef. So there's a little bit of that, so you can try it. All right, here we go. I'm going to flip my steak. Again, I don't have to worry about flare-ups, right? Because I'm not going crazy with it. I'm going to use a spoon. All right, so the butter, going to go in. Now I'm off the heat. Heat's off.
Okay. So you're just using the residual heat from the cast iron.
That's how hot the cast iron stays. Ooh. Thyme is going to go in. So I want the thyme. You're going to hear a little sizzle and fry. Get a little popping. That's the thyme. So at this point, with my spoon, and I almost did it again where I grabbed the hot cast iron, I'm going to kind of lean this pot up. Now I've got 2 steaks in here. It's a little easier to do without the steak. So the thyme is going to give up all of its wonderful essence. Herbaceousness, its essence to the butter here. So now I think thyme and steak, I don't know about you, but I think thyme and steak is one of the best combinations of anything. Anything I do, braised dish that has to do with meat, always has thyme in it because it's such a beautiful complement. So you can see how the butter's kind of it's all resting, right? The butter's on top, the thyme is kind of doing its thing. I'm gonna let that go. My butter's gone. My cauliflower steak. So I'm going to continue to let this go. Reason being,
I cannot wait for you to flip this.
I know,
so excited.
I want it to be dramatic. It needs to be dramatic. So I'm going to keep, I can already tell it's looking really, really in a spot where I think it's really, really good. I want to add can I add a little bit of butter to the cauliflower? I just want to add a little bit.
Oh, okay, just
No?
not the truffle, the regular. Yeah.
I'm just going to do regular. I'll do regular.
Now
I would finish this the same way. I'm going to add a little bit of butter to this. Again, anything good you eat in a restaurant usually is doused in a little bit of butter. But we're trying to show you how to not have to do that if you don't want to. So a little bit of our sauce here. I got a little bit of thyme going. A little bit of thyme to the cauliflower. You will not believe the flavor. This is how you can do anything. Chicken breast, sear fish like this, anything. All right, so I'm going to do a little more of our butter over the top. And again, you saw me only do 1 application of salt, right? Only 1. I'm going to hit it again here. I'm trying to get the butter over the top. Oh, mama! I wish you could. All right, I can see the bottom, so I think it's going to be dramatic enough. Let me just peek. I'm going to peek.
Oh!
Getting there. All right, this is how we're going to check the cauliflower.
You're killing me.
I have my little knife. I know, right?
It's underneath the steak, chef.
We're going to check the doneness by just sticking the knife in.
We have a question
it's not quite
really
done.
quickly.
Yes, ma'am.
Ashley wants to know if you use salted or unsalted butter. It's a good
Always
question.
unsalted. Great question. I always use unsalted.
I always use salted. That's so funny.
I always use unsalted. Reason why I think most restaurants, any chef will tell you they use unsalted because they want to be able to control the amount of salt that's going on. If I've got a stock that's really salty, if I've got a pasta that's salty, I want to use unsalted butter because that way I know butter is going to be for flavor and not for seasoning. And I don't want to have that butter really salty because then it may be that perfect thing that I'm doing right now. But if I've got salted butter and I've oversalted it, it's like wah, wah. So I always use unsalted. If you like a lot of salt, you can. Where's my mirepoix salt? Hit it with a little bit more here. A little bit more. Again, most of it's going to fall off when I flip this. Take my towel back. All right, here we go. We're going to flip it. Here we go. Can you see? Here we go. The steak is pretty much done. I know it's done when I start to see some of the juice start to come up on the top. So I'm going to let that kind of rest up here. I'm going to show you right here as I flip.
Woo-wee.
So I'm going to turn up this. I'm going to turn that one off. And I'll go back to over here.
So,
and that's
Chef,
that. So I'm just going to cook it until it's fork tender. Yes,
so
ma'am.
you said that you know that your steaks are ready when they have the...
There's a little bit of juice that starts to come up. There's a little bit of juice. You'll start to see, as you flip it. Now, I did just baste it in butter, so you're like, hello, genius. There's
But
already
the red
juice on top.
sort of... Okay.
You'll see some of that juice start to come out on top. Now, I don't know how you like your steak. Usually like medium...
I'm a mid-rare.
Mid? Okay.
But a ribeye is so kind of juicy and tender that you can
It's a lot of fat.
Yeah.
So to wrap up here, I'm just going to show you this. Let's do this. Let me get I'm going to flip over my cutting board because then it's just clean again. That's how we do that. All right, so I have a little meat on this side. I'm going to flip it over. So who's gonna make mirepoix salt now, or any kind of salt for crying out loud? Like you
I'm gonna
get
make that
kosher
cauliflower.
salt. Cauliflower is delicious. Again, finishing a little butter, a little truffle salt on our steak. All right, here we go.
Callie says that she's gonna make the mirepoix salt, also an orange salt, she said, and then she said that her husband has demanded the mac and mornay. So that's on her grocery list.
Demanded.
As well.
All right, check this out. This is our conserva here. Ready for this? This is our. Wah, wah, wah. I love our ministers of what we call our sound and camera here. Jay and Rob doing their thing. So you can see like how the stems obviously released most of the tomatoes, but they flavored it, and you just get this little. I mean, come on, look at that. What? So good. The smell is incredible. I promise you, you wake up to smelling this, you will not be upset about it. All right. It may not go with your morning cup of joe, but it smells delicious. All right, cauliflower steak. I'm going to turn that off. I've got no more heat on anything. I'm going to check. Oh, here's my little paring knife hiding from me. I'm going to just poke it. This is all we're going to do, the poke test for the cauliflower. I want it to be a little toothy, but you see how there's a little bit of resistance, but not much? It's done. So again, this I turned off the heat and let it rest. Do you see the little juice? Hang on. Wait for it. Wait, Jay. Wait,
Yeah.
Jay. Here it comes. Here it comes. Cauliflower's moved. Here comes the steak back on. Do you see that little bit of the kind of red juices kind of popping up? That's kind of it telling you that it's like we're at the right point where we need to be, which is about medium, maybe a little more medium rare. It's different. All steaks are different. That's why I hate when people say, check your heat on your grill by putting your hand over it. That sounds like a smart idea, right? Just burn your hand. But
you did stick your finger into
I did,
boiling
212 degree water,
so,
but
okay.
this is my hot finger.
Oh, got it.
These are
okay.
hot fingers. So they're able to, I can stir the water. Still very salty. So there we go. So I need my plate. Let me grab a plate. It's all going to come together right now. Here it is. I'm going to cut my steak. I got the cauliflower steak on its own plate because I want to put a little bit of this delicious conserva right over the top here. All right.
I feel like we have to make a disclaimer that none of Tompkins' fingers were injured during the making of this class, filming of this class.
Remember when I talked about did we talk about presentation side?
No, we haven't. Please, go ahead.
So you see how my cauliflower, see how it's nice and cooked? So this is good. It's a good sear. I don't know if you can see that. It's a nice sear. But I think I like this side a little bit better. See that? That's my presentation side. Same thing with a steak. If you're cooking a steak on a grill and you do the nice hash marks, well, what if you mess it up? It's okay. You got two sides, right? So if you mess up the first one, okay, that's not my presentation side. I'm going to flip that over, and this will be my presentation side. Same thing. If you go to a good steakhouse and you want to try and call them on, you can always just look over the bottom side. If it's completely perfect on both sides, you're good. But sometimes you'll catch them being like, oh, little miscue. It's our little. Okay, so the steak. Let me pull these off. Again, this steak has continued to cook in that residual heat. So I'm talking about the residual heat when we cook things. So there's still a lot of heat in this. Which steak looks better? This guy? Let's do this guy. All right, so here's how I would do this. Let me put a towel here first. I don't ever recommend carving the meat too soon. Always let it rest. However, I'm going to break all those rules and carve it right now. So I'm going to give it a little, and I'm going to put more of that butter on top. So I'm just going to kind of dab it on a towel here. Just dab, 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 dab. And then we're going to cut said steak with cauliflower. It goes perfect. I just wipe it on my pants. It's like no big deal. It's like it just goes away. Here we go. All right. So this is, I would say, more medium. This is kind of like a warm pink center. But you have all that beautiful fat here. So here we go. I'm going to scoop this bad boy up right here on a steak. I don't know about you guys. I don't like when people cut my steak. I don't eat a lot of red meat, but when I do, I don't want somebody cutting up my steak. I just did it to show you guys. Typically, you bring it whole to the table and it looks really pretty. And then with my spoon here, remember all that beautiful thyme and everything, all that butter. And it's just
I want some crusty bread with
right?
that.
I should have done, hang on, Trud, I'll just whip up some sourdough. All right, and then we got our mac and cheese here. So hold on. The mac. Can't forget about the mac and cheese. So I'm going to do a little, let's get actually a clean pair of tongs. Don't want to mess up my beautiful mac and cheese. All right, so the bechamel. Again, our mac. This is like so stinking creamy. It's like, it should be illegal. All right, I'm going to go right here. Boom, boom, boom.
Look
boom.
at that stack.
Stack it up. Usually you put it around tongs and you roll it like that, and you pull it up, and it looks really pretty.
I eat it out of the pan, out of the pot.
This is just home cooking, like kind of home cooking. All right, a little parsley on my cauliflower, a little fresh chive on my mac and cheese because I love that little kick of onion. A little bit of parsley on this, and just a touch of mirepoix salt on everything.
Parsley is like another like restaurant.
It is. It just gives it a little bit of color. But I'm also going to do
yeah.
this, Charlotte, because we have it. The conserva. Ooh. It's going to get a little bit of shallot, a little bit of tomato in there. The shallot is. It's just. Look at the color on that. What? Are you kidding me? Look at that. It's just like, just melts.
Oh.
Just melts. Was there a smushing noise I made with my mouth? All right, there we go. So that's that. This is this. There we go. Move this out of the way. Nice clean landing space. So that is that. Folks, anybody can do this. I promise. It's really, really easy. Thank you guys so much for hanging out and being here tonight. I hope that your 2021 is starting off really, really well. I hope that these cooking techniques and recipes are working for you. You can always rewatch. Again, if you want to rewatch it, you can always go back to the videos on our YouTube channel, heb.com/YouTube, or is it youtube.com/ you just YouTube HEB, and that'll should fill up with all of our great videos. Thank you, Charlotte, for hanging out.
Thanks for
Rob,
inviting
Jay,
me.
You guys are awesome. Thanks
this is going to definitely,
doing.
I might have to go back and look at this for Valentine's
Day.
Yeah,
we have some really good content coming up, but there's always more stuff. Stay tuned. Go to heb.com/classes to sign up for all the future classes. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. It really humbles us to know that you guys show up and you want to learn and want to do this, and we hope that we are teaching you some great skills and techniques. Join us the next time we do this for hopefully more fun in the sun. And I didn't burn myself. I'm fine. I don't think anybody's worried about it because I don't think they care. I think it's okay. I didn't burn myself. It's all good. I reached in. We're good. So anyway, we'll stick around the chat. We'll stick around to answer questions. Otherwise, you can rewatch this on YouTube. You can follow along. You can pause when I'm in like weird poses, and you can pause and pick it back up and do whatever. So that's it. Now it's time to eat. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next time.